Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Inverted Orthodoxy Podcast. My name is Blake. I'm with Kyle and Doug, and we're pastors at Living Springs Church. It's good to be back, guys.
Great to have you back.
I missed 1 week, but feels like two. I don't know how it works in the interweb world, but
Time
Time is
again.
a construct.
yes,
We've missed you for weeks, Blake.
weeks, but I am back, and we're ready to answer some of your questions on this podcast. We take your questions, we answer them, and we like to explore just all the twists and turns of faith and celebrate all the beautiful complexities of the things we believe in. So diving in, we're going to start with some AER.
Time for accusations, explanations, and recantations.
All right, this says, just wanted to say in response to the algorithm on social media, I have found following political parties and people who are on both sides of the conversation help to make sure I don't get stuck in the thoughts of one specific side. As a Christian, it has helped me to be open to different views. That's from episode 415.
Great practice. I think the more widely you can read, the better. It's funny because I know which of my social media platforms have me pegged in one direction or another, but neither of them are the same at all. It's funny because I'll read across different things that I'll go, oh, this one thinks I'm leaning this way, and this one thinks I lean that way. And it's entertaining. So you do have to put in effort to trick the algorithm into feeding you a width of perspective.
I think it's wonderful. Read, listen to things that you are pretty sure or that you know you won't agree with.
Yes.
I heartily recommend that. I think we should do that. Yeah. You will realize some of the rationale behind why people come to conclusions that you don't like, which might make you go, although I disagree, I can see that your motives are not what I thought they were.
Yep.
Or sometimes you may go, there's some validity to that. But whether or not you in the end agree with that, it'll be enlightening for you for sure. Sometimes in reading stuff I disagree with, I become more aware of why I believe what I believe.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true enough. All right, so first question today then. This says, I often hear people saying your loved ones in heaven are looking down on earth to see us and are with us. I can't imagine they would want to see the state of our world. What is your opinion on this view? Forgot to mention that some people have quoted Hebrews 12, verse 1 in regards to this, talking about surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses.
Mm-hmm. There is zero clarity on how this all works in a number of ways. There are people who would be staunchly on either side of things, and I think there's a lot more mystery than we can think of. If you were going to use Jesus' words, you've got the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, where there's no communication between between the afterlife and the current life. It's a parable. People will use that one.
I struggle with using that one for anything afterlife when you read that Jesus told this parable to the Pharisees because they loved money.
Correct. And I agree. I don't use it for that, but people will say there is no communication awareness of this world from the afterlife using that for it. On the other hand, you see in the picture in Revelation, you get the tears of the saints being poured out onto the earth. And so there are both at some point people present and the prayers of the saints, people present in heaven while there are events still happening on earth. And there's an awareness and a connection there that is present. And this is back to the conversation, not to rip open a wound, of prayers to the saints. You've got the Hebrews cloud of witness as well. So there is some basis for either side and no clarity on either, I don't believe. What I will say is, if there is a chance for those in the eternal state to be able to see and be aware of what's happening in the present, that's a whole philosophical conversation as is. How can you be in eternity, be aware of present? That's another separate piece. They are also then in the state of Jesus' final victory and therefore wouldn't have fear. They could have sadness over the state of the world, but they have a confidence in the final victory of Jesus that I don't think would emote the same things we would think looking at the world from an outside perspective, because they're aware of how it would all work out.
Yeah.
I think we would have a hard time grasping their perspective if they could see it.
Correct.
Because and I'm not discounting that the state of the world has lots of issues. But Jesus came and said, repent, the kingdom of heaven is near.
Yep.
He said, heaven is closer than you realize.
Yep.
You have to change your thinking because it's all around you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we miss it because we can't see it. If you are in that eternal state, you're in heaven, and your perspective has been shifted to see the way that Jesus calls you to see because that repentance has been completed. Maybe you look at the world and you're not so preoccupied with the problems, but you see heaven breaking out in all sorts of ways that that we are oblivious to. Maybe the people in heaven, if they're looking down on our lives, are like, heaven is breaking out right in front of you and you can't even see it.
Yep.
And they're screaming at us that the world is far more beautiful and far more amazing and God is far more active than we realize, and encouraging us to change our perspective on what's going on.
What's that C.S. Lewis line that Christianity's light?
It's like the sun. It's not
like
just
the sun.
Well, not that I see it, but I see everything else by it.
Yeah, that I wonder if that
butchering
plays
it, but-
into. You're on the better track than I was. Of the ability to see Christ at work and His hand in the kingdom of God before us in the world at all times is something most of us are dulled to.
So I think that just speaks to. I think it'd be hard to comprehend how different our perspective would be on everything when we are in heaven.
Whenever I think of these questions, I always think of Bible school professor that had said, your theology doesn't always need to and should not match funerals. That when you're dealing with people in grieving and whatever, and they're like, my grandma's looking down on me. He's like, you say yes.
Correct.
Right? Like that's not a moment to correct anybody or debate with them. So I just think of these questions. I'm always like, yes, it's good to have perspective. It's good to think about them. But when you're caring for somebody, then you just care for them, right?
Totally.
So yes, just love on people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next question. Do you think, or how much do you think that what we do as a church in Western society reflects now what the church was designed to be? Do you think it is more feminine in its expression? Is it the only place outside of sports and concert that most people sing? I wonder if the way we do church inherently serves females and broad female expressions more than what helps men engage. If you were to build a new church without any past history and expectation, what would that church look like for each of you?
Those are radically different questions, so I think we should approach them.
Oh yeah,
as
there's a
very
lot
different.
of them in here.
I think if you go back to the early church, to just start in the middle of the question, I think if you even go back to the writings of Paul and looking at the book of Acts, you see it appears to be possibly women more active in the church than men.
The church history period has been that way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I would say probably.
depending on what you mean by more active, because sometimes women have been pushed to the sidelines.
It's been more
different
populated by women historically
Yes, but-
throughout the whole of church history, while heavily being influenced and led by men.
Yes,
The
and that's
fullness
where
of
the
it.
tension would be.
Yes.
Because I think if you look across different points in history, you would see a lot of men.
Correct.
That's not to discount women, but just to say they were pushed to the side.
Correct.
And marginalized, and history records the men who were active.
Yes.
So,
And then has buried the women that were active in their time. There's a book I've got here, Tell Her Story, The Gospel According to Eve, that unpacks a bunch of hidden female scholarship that has been throughout the days that has literally just been overwritten and buried, even while they were active in their day.
right, and that's my point.
Yeah.
If you look at the New Testament, you can see that. But I think if you look through church history, you don't see that.
Correct.
I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying you didn't see
Yes,
it.
I agree with you.
So I think that there's often been a possibly more female involvement and leading into the church. I don't think that's a new problem at all. That's not to say that church is necessarily feminine in its expression. I think that's just to say that sometimes guys can have their head a little bit up their butt and not focus on the things that matter.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to say, I think had I read this question in my 20s, I'd be like, yeah, right. Church
We
is
need more manly church.
Church is so girly and it's all about feelings and all the rest. And I don't know if I've softened or hopefully just become more like Christ or whatever. But now approaching 50 rapidly, I think of church and I think, yeah, like it is like their emotions are what are a big part of being a Christian and loving people, right? And if you just press those down to the side and we didn't have that, maybe it'd be really manly, but it wouldn't be very Christ-like, I think. So I feel more like I want men to be more expressive than the other. So.
Yeah. I was talking actually at our last book club. I had been thinking about this recently. I think one of the things is Christianity asks you to surrender power, control, all that to allow Jesus to be a ruler of your life. That's its basic premise. Christ is Lord. Women have been forced to do that throughout history and current society more than men have.
Yeah.
And men have been pushed more to try to hold on to control and be dominating. And so church, because of its basic premise of surrender, control, and authority over your life and come to Christ and allow him to do that, is averse more to stereotypical male culture of our day. And part of why I think women are more welcome and comfortable in church, because they've been both, one, used to that and would rather do that with Jesus than the way the rest of the world has forced them to do it. And men are resistant to it for that reason. And then the groups of churches that are very, in air quotes for the podcast listeners, successful with raising male populations within the church often are more those complementarian. The man gets the power because you're like Christ and you're going to wield it in such a way. And they drive that image of power holding Jesus and masculinity, which is much more comfortable and welcome in culture. And therefore you don't have to submit nearly as much. You just have to refine your power towards how you're supposed to use it. We could have all that debate over theology about male and female roles, but I think that's part of why the more complementarian side of things is welcomes more men. But I believe the message of Christianity, most accurately depicted, is a message of surrender over your control and power.
Yeah, I like that, Kyle. I think that was very well said.
And so, I think we will historically have seen, and until that changes in our wider culture, always have a more, air quotes again, feminine feeling church, because it does not affirm that side of masculinity of take and seize and maintain power.
I don't disagree with you. I do think that at times in the last 30 years, the church has feminized some aspects of church. Some of the worship songs we sing have been very like, Jesus is my boyfriend.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the phrase I always
very much so.
So we have at times kind of pushed the envelope that way.
Right. Yep.
In a way that I do think is like, there have been times that I've been in church and I'm like, this song's awkward.
Yeah, this is weird. Yeah. True.
Yeah, no disagreement on that. But at the same time, I think overall.
And again, I'm not disagreeing with anything you said.
Yeah.
Do you think, or how much do you think we as a church in Western society reflect now what the church was designed to be?
This is a really complex question.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an easy answer for. Anytime somebody goes back to Acts and says this is what the church was, and then tries to make a model of what it must always be, misses the rest of the New Testament. Each church, each letter that we have is written to a different church struggling with a different problem and trying to draw a different group of people towards a different purpose. There are seemingly conflicting messages that Paul writes to two different contexts for the sake of them being Christ to their context, different than them being Christ in another context. So within the first generation after Jesus, we already recognize Paul is encouraging distinction around the expression of who we are to be in our local area to bring the kingdom of God there. And so the church cannot follow a perfect model of Western or even Easternness, because the church is supposed to be in response to its culture, bringing Jesus in its day and by its people. This is the beautiful picture we see at the end of time in Revelation of the nations speaking to different cultures and ways of doing things, all worshiping Jesus in their distinct tongue and their distinct art form and their distinct practice. Like, that's the picture that's given. So if we then say a church has to look like this, either Eastern or Western, modern or ancient, whatever it may be, we can very quickly go too far and prescribe something that the New Testament never meant for the church to be. The church is meant to be more an organism, alive, adapting, moving to its day and to its world than some organization, which I think, but there's space for both of those pieces of language in our talking about church, but it is more the organism side, responding to its environment, than it is anything else. And so there's a beauty and importance to localized expression of church. I don't want our church to look and be able to be transported, taken over even just to Calgary and placed there, or to Crossfield and placed there, and it works just as well. Because then it's not reaching the people where it's planted.
See, and that's where, as you say that, I was just thinking, it's an interesting question to me, and thinking through again, like you say, just, as you start thinking broader about what we do as a church, we do have a very, this is what church looks like for most believers or people who go to church. Yep. And it's not like an Acts 2 church. It's whatever has become the church in whatever time period, that now we really do church the same way.
Yeah.
Pretty much worldwide. There's different little things, but we come to a building, we sit in rows, someone preaches, we sing. And if you mess with that, you're in trouble, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just funny that has somehow become. Yeah. So, you say it should be culturally relevant. I'm agreeing with everything you say. Yeah. But I know if we pick up our church and take it to Calgary or wherever, and we set it down and it wasn't that, it'd be like, hang on, you're messing with church. Right?
For a majority of people, but there's a bunch that want the house church.
Yeah.
There's a bunch that want church sitting around on the outside and the music's in the center. There's a bunch that and this is the beauty of the distinctness of church in the day. I remember talking on the podcast here at 1.2 about the huge importance of the American black church as a response to the white church keeping them out and segregating from them. So in response, they started a church of their own that could speak to all sorts of different means of God's liberation for humanity as they had experienced slavery. That was a response and a redemption out of something ugly. And so now we don't erase that.
Yeah.
Now there's this beautiful picture of what God has done because of our sinfulness. And there's beautiful expression of Jesus and hymns and art and ways of speaking and responding that are uniquely black, that need to be protected and valued while not being elevated to say, now everybody be like this. Mm-hmm. And so this beautiful ebb and flow within history, within culture, that God is at work and present amongst his people and is worshipped and dignified through different peoples and different cultures. That is so important. To prescribe what church should look like from 2,000 years ago to specifically is really dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I read this question, I kind of go the same way that you go, Kyle, that I don't think the church was ever what it was designed to be. If you read the New Testament, and not to make what we're doing good, just the reality of the fact it's filled with people. I do think that we do church in Western society, the vast majority of Christians the same way.
Yep.
And so you can look at some commonalities, even with, like you talk about, we come into a building, we sit in rows, we listen to somebody at the front who does some orating, we sing. All of those aspects of church are universal. Wherever people are being trained and empowered to love better, the church is being what it's designed to be.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that.
However that happens, to love God and to love people better, the church is being what it's designed to be. And the form that takes is secondary.
Yep.
The problem we have in the church is that we often, we do this with life. The form becomes the primary thing.
Yeah, we elevate that.
Right? We do that with family traditions at Christmas time, and we do that with all sorts of things. Church is just another example where we do it, and it's one where those forms can become even more ingrained because now we're doing them for God. Yeah. And so they become, the form becomes holy.
Yeah.
And so, that's what the church is designed to do, to train and empower people to live the way of Jesus, which is the way of radical self-sacrificial love. Yeah. And so whatever form it's taking to do that, I think is being what it's designed to. And that should be able to be changed across cultures.
I largely agree with you. I want to pick little bits just for fun. Because I hear that, and there's places in my life that has had that impact, but there's still some elements missing. And I think specifically, there's a couple of podcasts that have deeply influenced my way of following Jesus, of thinking about Jesus, but they have lacked the human connection and the presence with one another and the direct expression of my care for those outside of the followers of Jesus that I think are missing from church. And I don't think the church is the church until there's people gathered with their lives together. I think there's room for that to be happening digitally, but be listening to a podcast versus being connected to those people, that's different. And so I think there needs to be that. There needs to be a distinction of those lives. If we become too homogenous, that's not the early church. Like Paul fights over and over. There might be more ink spilled on the distinction of people coming together from Paul than there is on even things about Jesus at parts of his letters, of like how important it is for us to be different from one another to be able to come together and to cross those lines that culture would otherwise have us continue to perpetuate. I think the celebrating of Jesus specifically through communion is a requirement for a church. And I think reflection on Scripture would be one I'd argue for.
So pause there.
Yeah.
So you're saying
Yeah.
that if a church, because I know lots of churches
Yeah.
that gather every Sunday that no longer do communion.
Yeah.
You're saying they're not churches?
No, I can't go that far. I can't go that far. But
you can
that
say
really,
that they're missing.
that really
a
grieves
piece
me.
That,
I'm not saying I'm not debating that.
Yeah.
I'm not debating that at all.
Yep.
We've made the choice to do that because we all believe powerfully in it. I just wouldn't say they're not a church because they don't do it.
No, but that seems integral to the early church's view of what it means to be the people gathered, and it's the point at which people's lives intermingle with one another. Mm-hmm. And so I do believe ritual is a part of church, for the church to be the church, and communion and baptism are those two means. And so I won't go so far as to say they're not a church if they don't celebrate communion on a regular basis. But if you don't have baptism or that, like, again, I know some big mega churches, it'd be pretty hard to facilitate all the baptisms that need to take place. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you are the church without those two things that Jesus told us to do. And I think that's a part of the bringing us together. If those are happening in small group capacities, awesome. And I think that counts. It's a part of that larger group. We don't see the 5,000 that got saved in Acts come together and do communion and baptism. So it doesn't have to be all the time and present. But if that's not happening, I don't know how you're having a Christian life without communion and baptism within the community that you are a part of in some capacity.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with you.
And that's all right. We're allowed to disagree on this podcast. We've done it many times.
I'm not debating
Yeah.
that I think they're extremely important. I would not question whether or not they're churches. I would say
I don't doubt that those people are saved. I doubt whether that I have struggling whether that's a church. And there's the difference.
And I guess maybe when I hear that, I'm well aware of all the people online who regularly talk about, well, that's not a church, that's a goat farm, and that's
true.
That accusation, just I want to stay as far away from that as I can.
Totally fair.
Because I want to let Jesus be the judge of those things, not me.
Fair.
So
we are bumping up against time, but I was going to say, just as I kind of wrap up to the community piece, like there's lots of pieces that make church. Like I do agree, communion, obviously, I go to this church and love communion and think it's high. I think baptism's high, but then there's other parts, like you said, community. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes like you could go to an online church and maybe that you're not getting community, but you can go to in-person church and not get community either.
Totally.
Like that's something that,
But there are people in the 21st century who say their community is online.
Yeah.
And who have genuine relationship. And that's where, for me, I'm like, again, this is where I'm like, I'm trying to, and my definition was one that I was coming up with spontaneously.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I wanted to just gently pick.
But I do think that God has moved throughout history in many different forms. And the way that we take as the holy way now, Sunday morning, we don't even realize it's Sunday morning at 10 or 11 o'clock, the holy hour, because that's when people could do their chores on the farm and then get to the church on time.
Yep.
That's how it was picked.
Yeah.
because it started 500 years ago, really, as a result of the Reformation. And well, no, I'd say
it was
before that.
well
The
earlier than
Catholic
that.
Church was doing that. Yeah. So I'll go back from there. But that was not. I'm just like, it's all, the form is never what is really the heart of God. It's what you're using that form to accomplish.
Yep.
And yes, I agree, and I believe strongly in those things. And they would be an important part of any church that I was going to be a part of or that I was going to pastor.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I'd go so far as to say, I don't know if you're a church.
And I won't confidently say they are not. I just don't know how you aim to structure your gathering of people around anything that doesn't include those two pieces and still say we're aiming for the same picture. And I'm not going to confidently say they're not. I just really struggle with that. And I intentionally didn't say the in-person gathering because I know the people that believe their community's online. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference between me consuming media on a podcast versus engaging with an online community.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I would say
Absolutely.
gathering with people in some capacity to be trained in love and
Correct.
empowered to love. Sure.
Because I could argue I've
say
been
that.
discipled in a one-way medium through learning information and being challenged that way, but I would not call that community and therefore not a church.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, we got to get out. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Inverted Orthodoxy Podcast. We love seeing you and love hearing your questions, so keep sending them in. Visit invertedorthodoxy.com where you can send us your questions. Remember to rate, like us, and review us everywhere you listen to these podcasts or watch us on YouTube. See you next week.